Spoštovani udeleženci te naše otvoritvene slovesnosti na novi univerzi, ki je združena tudi z Akademskim forumom Nove univerze z naslovom Prihodnost Evropske unije, izzivi, problemi. Ta današnja prireditev ima nekako dva dela. Prvi, krajši in uvodni del bo najprej predstavil prenos funkcije rektorja na novega rektorja, ki je hkrati tudi vodja Akademskega foruma, ki bo sledil tej prvi inaugurativni slovesnosti. Sam sem senatu Nove univerze sporočil, da je napočil čas za nastop nove generacije v mednarodni znanstveni in slovenski znanstveni skupnosti, ki naj bi vodila novo univerzo. Moja generacija, ki je ustanavljala novo univerzo in članice nove univerze, je že v letih in čas je, da se izvede simbolni in dejanski prenos dejavnosti razvoja, energij in dinamike na novo generacijo, na novega rektorja. In ker se je vodstvo nove univerze že od spomladi letos dogovarjalo z dr. Matejem Avblem za prevzem funkcije rektorja nove univerze in je pridobilo tudi njegovo soglasje, ga je senat nove univerze predlagal za imenovanje, upravni odbor pa je predlog sprejel in ga imenoval za rektorja po ugotovitvi, da izpolnjuje vse z zakonom in z statutom nove univerze predpisane pogoje za imenovanje, zlasti, da je dosegal habilitacijski status rednega profesorja. Navedena soglasja, predlogi in sklepi so sprejeti in podpisani, zato mi je veliko čast, da danes na tej inauguracijski, umestitveni, ustoličeni seji Akademskega zbora Nove univerze predam to funkcijo svojemu kolegu. Zdaj prosim kolega dr. Avbl, da tudi simbolno prevzamete to funkcijo s prevzemom insignije rektorske verige. S tem je ta prva slovesnost, slovesni del našega današnjega večera zaključen. Čestitam.
Hvala lepa.
Po protokolu seveda današnje slovesnosti je novi rektor zadolžen, da predstavi svojo vizijo razvoja in obstoja nove univerze.
Spoštovani gospod rektor, spoštovane kolegice in kolegi, dekani, študente in študentke, spoštovani gostje, Your Excellencies, v veliko čast, tudi osebni ponos mi je, da mi je senat in upravni odbor ponudil to priložnost, ki je hkrati velika odgovornost za vodenje nove univerze v naslednjih 2 letih. Dovolite mi, da na kratko, res na kratko, spregovorim, kako sam pravzaprav vidim novo univerzo in kaj je tisto, kar moramo v naslednjih letih postoriti. Sam vidim novo univerzo predvsem kot prostor, kot polje, platformo novih priložnosti. Vendar pa kaj sploh nova univerza je? Novo univerzo opredeljujeta dve besedi. Prva je univerza. Ta označuje prostor za pridobivanje, izpraševanje in ustvarjanje znanja. Znanje je univerzalno, od tu tudi izraz univerza. To pomeni, da znanje ne pozna meja, ne teritorialnih, ne ideoloških, pa tudi ne vseh mogočih meja, ki jih ustvarjajo osebne kaprice dan za dnem, ko našo stvarnost drobijo in zapletajo v neproduktivne spore. Ker je znanje univerzalno, ne izključuje, temveč nujno vključuje. In to vse tiste, ki se trudijo, ki vlagajo v svojo meritokracijo, da bi vedeli več in bili preprosto boljši. V tem pomenu je torej naša nova univerza univerza. Druga opredelilna beseda, drugi pridevnik naše nove univerze pa je besedica nova. Ta besedica nova pa ima opisno in normativno dimenzijo. Na opisni ravni, ki je v bistvu manj pomembna, je nova univerza pač nova v kronološkem smislu, ker je njen nastanek nedaven. Nova univerza je torej časovno nova izobraževalna iniciativa, ki pa je, in to je najbolj pomembno, nova tudi v vsebinskem in zato prav tako v normativnem smislu. V tem oziru nova univerza pomeni odmik od starega, predstavlja diskontinuiteto s prevladujočim načinom delovanja univerz na Slovenskem, ki so bile pogosto veliki, birokratski, hierarhično strukturirani, okorni in neučinkoviti sistemi, kar se je odražalo tako v odsotnosti pedagoške in raziskovalne odličnosti, kakor tudi v mednarodni izoliranosti. Še predtem pa je bila univerza pač ideološko orodje v rokah vladajoče politike, ter s tem nasprotje kritične znanstvene univerzalnosti, kar naj bi po svoji definiciji bila. Nova univerza, ki se vrednostno napaja iz vrednot ustavne demokracije, utemeljene na človekovem dostojanstvu ter vladavini prava, počrtani s političnim liberalizmom v evropski Sloveniji, svetovljanskim predznakom in globalno odprtostjo, pomeni prelom s tem starim. Nova univerza je zato avtonomna, zasebna izobraževalna ustanova, ki skozi vključujoč kritični dialoški pristop ustvarjalno prispeva k sooblikovanju javnega prostora ter gradi na znanju kot temeljni dobrini skupnega dobra. Vse te prvine se zrcalijo skozi 3 ustanovne članice nove univerze. Fakultete za državne evropske študije, ki bo kmalu obeležila 20 let, Evropske pravne fakultete, ki bo kmalu praznovala 15 let, ter Fakultete za slovenske in mednarodne študije, ki je nastala pred kratkim. Družboslovje torej, pravo, humanistika na preseku slovenstva, evropejstva in globalnega sveta so tiste teme, ki v največji meri zaznamujejo naš sodobni čas. Kličejo k reševanju novih izzivov, ki terjajo novo znanje, nove izkušnje ter nove kritično misleče in ustvarjalne posameznike. Skupaj s svojimi pridruženimi članicami ter fakultetami, ki bodo še nastale pod njenim okriljem, nova univerza tako v akademskem smislu pooseblja transdisciplinaren pristop. Nova univerza sicer temelji in gradi na 3 stebrih: pedagoškem, raziskovalnem in mednarodnem stebru. V pedagoškem smislu nova univerza na glavo obrača konvencionalni pristop k poučevanju. V središču nove univerze je študent. Njegov dialoški odnos s profesorjem, ki svojo avtoriteto ne gradi na umetni hierarhiji, temveč na znanju temelječi meritokraciji. V tem pedagoškem procesu se profesor ne sme več skrivati za katedrom, niti zahtevati od študentov učenja na pamet. Na novi univerzi, po umiljeni sokratski metodi, študij poteka v obliki razprav med profesorji in aktivnimi študenti, ki naj poleg osnovnega razumevanja problematike, ki jo obravnavajo, razvijajo do te problematike tudi lasten, kritičen, ustvarjalni odnos. Zato se v predavalnicah nove univerze pogosto glasneje slišijo izvirna vprašanja kot vnaprej naučeni odgovori. Vselej pa bi, po mojem mnenju, na prvem mestu veljalo stati vprašanje, kaj in zakaj pa vi mislite. Drugi steber je raziskovalni. Ta služi epistemološkemu namenu, torej ustvarjanju novega znanja samega na sebi, ter hkrati njegovi uporabi v praksi. Raziskovalno delo profesorjev nove univerze je tisto, ki omogoča v pedagoški proces vnašati praktične vsebine ter obenem nova znanstvena spoznanja. Raziskovalno delo poteka v okviru raziskovalnih skupin fakultet nove univerze, ki so izjemno uspešne v slovenskem ter odmevne tudi v mednarodnem merilu, kjer se oblikujejo evropski znanstveno-raziskovalni prostor na področju prava, družboslovja, humanistike in drugih področij. Naše vodilo je odličnost, ki jo raziskovalno izvažamo navzven in v sodelovanju s kolegi iz najuglednejših tujih univerz uvažamo sem k nam v Slovenijo. Slovenijo tako pomagamo uvrščati na evropski, zares svetovni akademski ter raziskovalni zemljevid. To zadnje pa je že neposredno povezano s tretjim mednarodnim stebrom nove univerze. Ker je znanje univerzalno, se ne ustavlja in se ne more ustavljati na nacionalnih mejah, tam nekje pod karavankami. Zato nova univerza na bilateralni, večlateralni, institucionalni in osebni ravni profesorjev ter raziskovalcev sklepa pedagoške, raziskovalne in druge profesionalne sporazume v Evropi, Združenih državah Amerike in Izraelu. In te nam omogočajo nadaljnjo institucionalno rast in usposabljanje študentov v prizadevanju k preomenjeni odličnosti. Če me zatorej vprašate, kaj je vizija nove univerze, kaj je naš cilj, je popolnoma jasno. Odličnost na prej omenjenih treh področjih. Odličnost na pedagoškem, raziskovalnem in mednarodnem področju. V času mojega rektorovanja se bo ta vizija uresničevala skozi 3 akcijske stebre. Vse dobre stvari so 3. All good things come in 3. Torej 3 akcijski stebri. Prvi steber bo posvečen zagotavljanju stabilnosti univerzitetnega delovanja. Drugi dviganju kakovosti pedagoškega, raziskovalnega in strokovnega dela na univerzi. Tretji pa internacionalizaciji nove univerze. Seveda vemo, da vsega tega ne morem doseči sam. Pri vsem tem bomo uspešni le, če bomo te cilje in te univerzitetne ambicije pripoznali kot skupne, ter jih izvrševali v tesnem sodelovanju med dekani, profesori, raziskovalci, študenti, strokovnimi službami in upravo. Pred nami je novo akademsko leto, ki ga s to slovesnostjo slovesno otvarjamo. To novo akademsko leto bo polno študijskih, pedagoških, raziskovalnih in profesionalnih izzivov. Ogromno priložnosti bo torej ne za strah in obup, ampak ogromno priložnosti bo, da se izkažemo. Vsem članom nove univerze zato želim veliko ustvarjalne energije, poguma, odločnosti in uspeha. Tako, spoštovani, s tem uvodnim nagovorom lahko štejemo, da se je uradna uvodna slovesnost zaključila in bi prešli na drugi del, to je na Akademski forum. Kot smo obljubili, bo ta drugi del potekal v angleškem jeziku, which means that I will now switch to English. As announced in the invitation to today's event, the second part of today's meeting will take place in English and will be dedicated to an academic forum addressing the challenges of the future of the European Union. Before I invite my distinguished speakers to the floor, let me tell you briefly, let me share a few remarks with you about the content, structure, and the nature of the academic forum. This academic forum will be dedicated to the future of the European Union. In so doing, we are starting a series of debates. We'll have at least 10, maybe 15 meetings throughout the year, which will shed the light on the perplexing question of what's been wrong in the European Union and where this European Union is supposed to travel in the future. This questioning will be situated in a larger project funded by the Slovenian Research Agency dedicated to the development of an integral theory of the future of the European Union. And today, as said before, we'll be starting it with the question of challenges. But before doing so, let's ask ourselves a question. Why are we raising the question of the future of the European Union in the first place? I mean, you rarely see that the United States would raise the question of itself, of its own future, of China re-examining its soul about its own future. I think that raising a question about the future of the European Union is an expression of our weakness. It's an expression of our anxiety, even angst. And this anxiety or angst are understandable given the whole chain of crises that the European Union has been involved in over the last decade or even 15 years. It all started with the failure of the Constitution for Europe in 2005, where the optimism was at its peak. If you recall that moment in time, that was immediately after the enlargement, which was a success. At that time, the European Union wanted to constitutionalize itself. People were even speaking about finalité, another end of history of the European Union, creating a European federal state. However, with the demise of the Constitution of Europe, all those ideas were in tatters. And after that, it took us 2 years to have a Denkpause, period of reflection, which was finalized by the adoption of the Treaty of Lisbon. And I still remember vividly Chancellor Angela Merkel, who's now also exiting her office, who proclaimed that with the adoption of the Treaty of Lisbon in 2009, Europe has sort of found its peace. It has found its peace and stability for a tranquil and gentle traveling in the future. However, as she said that, the economic crisis came from the other side of the Atlantic. First the financial crisis, then the economic crisis, which soon translated into a political crisis, the crisis of populism, rule of law, and democracy. To that we added the crisis of migration, humanitarian crisis, and security crisis. And the European Union has been entangled in all these crises now for 15 years. Provisionally, those crises have been solved, or at least a lid has been put on the pot. However, it is quite clear that the present status quo, while comfortable in good times of economic growth, that this status quo is probably unsustainable. And with this impression of unsustainability of the current status quo, it was necessary to raise the question of what to do next. What shall we do to reform the European Union to ensure our long-term viability? This used to be an academic debate. Now, with the new Commission and with the insistence of the French President, Emmanuel Macron, we will also have an institutional debate, a convention on the future of Europe, that our project hopes to contribute to it as well. However, to focus, with academics it's really hard. The challenge for academics is not to be too broad and too long. I've been that already. To focus today, we're going to put on the table 3 challenges for the European Union. One is the proverbial one, which is going to be fortunately addressed, and I'm extremely honored to have you, Your Excellency here, Sophie Honey, the Ambassador of the United Kingdom. This will be, of course, the question of Brexit. From that, we will move to a challenge for Slovenia, the presidency, the forthcoming presidency, which is around the corner. And I'm also extremely honored to have with us Mr. Igor Mali, State Secretary and head of the Slovenian EU presidency in 2021. So these will be more imminent challenges. And finally, we will have our former rector, former judge of the Slovenian Constitutional Court, a founding father of Slovenian Constitution, and a founding father, perhaps, of the new European Constitution, as it was penned by the Ljubljani initiative, who is going to be invited to paint a bigger picture about the challenges that we will be the 2 previous speakers will address. So, after a long story, and to cut this long story short, I really like to invite you to take the floor, and maybe Sophie, it could be you to say a word or two where we now stand with Brexit and what's there to follow. Please, take a seat. What is now? It's been a long. I'm not going to recapitulate the entire trajectory and the chronology of this of the Brexit saga. But the thing is that our impression here is that we are now at the 11th hour. The 31st of October is the D-Day or the B-Day. Where does Your Majesty government stand on that, and how does your country see the developments that can take place in the following weeks?
Thank you, Matej. Mogoče bom preklopila zelo kratko v slovenščino, da lahko vam zahvaljujem. To je zelo težka beseda za nas, za povabilo danes. Meni je veselo, da lahko pridružim.
Z največjim veseljem, hvala.
Današnjega otvoritev. Hvala. But back to the question, which I won't try in Slovene, because I know today is an English event, but also I will try to be clear, and I might struggle more in Slovene with that. I definitely would. But thank you very much. I think you're right. Where are we? We are 3 and a bit years on from the referendum, and just over 4 weeks away from the date when the UK is due to leave the EU. There are some things that haven't changed very much. If you look at polling around British public opinion, around views on the referendum, it's actually pretty similar, to some people's surprise, to 3 years ago. But one thing that is clear in some of the recent polling is that there is actually a majority of people who think we should deliver on the referendum. And the reason for that is not really because views around leave or remain have changed. It's remained fairly static, but around a third of people who voted remain, in the referendum, sort of take the view that we had a massive democratic exercise, and whilst they voted for remain and might still hold that view, they believe that it's important to deliver on the referendum. So just to sort of perhaps try and give you the headlines as I see it from where we are now. And from the government's perspective, the government wants to leave the EU with a deal because of delivering on the referendum, and there is very intensive work going on to that end to try and reach a deal. So there have been very intensive negotiations going on in Brussels with Task Force 50, with the UK essentially putting forward behind closed doors proposals about how we can reach a deal, but without the backstop. So really looking at alternatives to the backstop, and I'll come on and explain that. But alternatives to the backstop so that the UK can reach a deal with the EU and preserve an open border on the island of Ireland when we leave. And those discussions have been going on, but our Prime Minister made clear this morning that the UK will shortly be tabling proposals. And this is a really crucial period we're coming up to with quite a short window now in the run-up to European Council where it's going to be really, really critical. So I mentioned the backstop. Igor was kindly giving me the Slovene translation, Irsko varovalo, right? And you might say, well, what's wrong with the backstop? For goodness sake, this came out of 2 years of negotiation between the previous British government and the EU. And the goal of the Irsko varovalo was to ensure that the UK could exit as per the referendum, but also protect the integrity of the single market, which is crucial, and ensure an open border on the island of Ireland. So it's there. Why mess with it? Why cause all these problems? But there are 2 big issues with the backstop. And the first is that we have tried 3 times to get the withdrawal agreement through Parliament in the UK with the backstop, and it has failed 3 times. At the same time, we know from votes that Parliament in Westminster would support the deal without the backstop because there are particular concerns around the backstop and what it means for sovereignty in the UK. So we don't have consent in Westminster. There's a second problem, which is that under the Good Friday Agreement, the principle of consent of the communities is crucial. So it's crucial to have the consent of both the communities in Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland on how you manage the border. And none of the unionist parties in the north of Ireland support the backstop. So aside from the issues in Westminster, there is also an issue, and that puts it in tension with the Good Friday Agreement, because the Good Friday Agreement is one of the key principles is about the principle of consent and the consent of both communities in how arrangements are managed. So those are the issues with the backstop, and what that means is that the withdrawal agreement that we have negotiated over this period of time sorts out so many things and provides us with a great framework on the way forward. But there has been an issue with this one part of it. So these intensive negotiations since the summer have really been to try and find another way, another solution, so that the UK can leave with a deal. And the UK's view is that this can be done with political will and flexibility. It can't be possible that the only way to solve this is by keeping either the whole of the UK or Northern Ireland within the customs union. And if you think about it, there are already two different legal, political, economic, monetary, fiscal jurisdictions on the island of Ireland. So what the proposals that we have been working up seek to do is to maintain that, and all of that exists, those different jurisdictions with an open border. No problem, that's not a problem. So what the proposals that we have been working up and putting forward seek to do is maintain that same open border even when we come out of the customs union. And we believe that that is possible. It does require flexibility and political will on both sides. We've been really heartened that President Juncker has said that he thinks it is possible to reach a deal and that he's not wedded to the backstop per se. So I think that's sort of broadly where we are at the moment. And my government's strong desire is to reach a deal because that will be the best way to exit and deliver on the referendum. And of course, there's been huge debate in Parliament, in the public domain. Sometimes when I see some Slovene colleagues, they say to me, "My goodness, I'm not sure I need my subscription to Netflix anymore because I just turn on that Parliament debate." And it's a bit, it's a sort of bit of a joke in the UK that the parliamentary channel, when it was first set up, it was really boring. But now everyone's watching for every twist and turn. And sometimes people look at this and they say to me, "What's going on? We thought you were one of the oldest democracies in the world. What's going on? This looks like chaos." Right? There are so many twists and turns. Most recently, our Supreme Court ruled that the government's decision to prorogue Parliament was unlawful. So what happened? The government made clear, of course, that they respect the ruling and the independence of the judiciary, and Parliament returned. And for me, that's actually the constitutional system and our democratic system working. So it's not always straightforward, but that's a really important part. And if you look at, I sort of explained where government is, but if you look at the position of Parliament, then it's clear that with Parliament, it's clear that there is also a majority to leave with the deal. And when we've had votes that have tested that, which have said, would you support this deal if the backstop can be amended, then there has been a clear majority. So that's why the government is seeking to get this through, and there is this window of opportunity now. So we're going to be working away at that and look to see what happens and count on colleagues and partners to encourage flexibility, really, and political will to try and reach a deal. And I guess just finally, I think the other thing that's true of the current British government, but it's true of all of the parties within the House of Commons, is that there is tremendous will to build a strong forward relationship and partnership with the European Union. I think that's clear on all sides. Obviously, it would be a different relationship, and that follows from the referendum that we had and the decision to put this to people. It was a narrow decision, as everyone knows, but that's democracy, but there is tremendous will to build that strong relationship going forward, not least so that we can be partners and supporters and work together on all of the other challenges that you referenced a bit, Matej, in your opening. I'll perhaps leave it there, but
Okay,
I'd love to hear what others think and open it up and discussions and questions.
Sure. Of course, there are many questions could be raised, but what we could really say is that it's a hard, difficult period also for the European Union. It's a transitional phase, transfer of power in Brussels going on. You mentioned President Juncker, who's now basically essentially left and will be replaced by von der Leyen. And Igor, you've been someone who've, still before a Sherpa, you have known these institutions also from the inside. And I wonder, from that perspective that you've known before, and now from your position as a secretary in the present government, and the future or the head of the person who's in charge of the Slovenian presidency to the European Union in 2021, which challenges would you point out as the most burning ones in the forthcoming maybe 6 months? And then which are those challenges that still probably Slovenia will need to pick up when its time comes to head the council?
Thank you for the invitation, firstly, and hello to everybody. I would put the challenges into brackets, into two piles. One is the short-term 6-month challenges, and as I see, there are only two. One is managing Brexit, if and when it happens, and the other is the EU budget. As in every government, the key question is the budget. We are calling it the MFF, Multi-Annual Financial Framework. It's a 7-year long budget, which is usually the hardest negotiations in the EU. Money is always, the most hard issue to divide or to agree upon. So those two issues are the crucial ones for the next, I would say, 6 years, and I hope that at least as concerns the Brexit issue, we would get the answer from the UK side as soon as possible, what the UK wants, and how then are we going to deal with it as an EU 27. And with this, it relates also the negotiations on the EU budget, which, according to my expectations, should or would end in spring next year. I would really wish that the MFF negotiations would end this year, but I'm not so much of an optimist on this, because there are a lot of challenges ahead, and maybe in discussion we can discuss also about the MFF, so the budget. The mid-term challenges, there are quite a few for the Commission and for the EU in general. For the Commission, I think there are mainly two. One is how the Commission would be more efficient on one side and less political in this changing world, changing EU on the other. And the other challenge is how to tackle, as an EU, the challenges we are facing in the modern world, from trade disputes to geopolitical shifts, stuff like this. To go from so-called G2 back to G something more, at least G3, so that the EU would respond efficiently and effectively to the challenges of the globalized world. Washington now has now a totally different policy than 10 years ago. China is totally different, so stuff like that. And in parallel, we have the challenges like climate, competitiveness, and still some unfinished work, like finalization of the monetary union, internal market, enlargement, when and if it would happen. So these are the challenges ahead for the EU and the Commission. Now you mentioned the Slovenian presidency. Slovenia is presiding in the second half of the 2021, which is a bit different than in our first presidency, because we were presiding not the EU but the Council of the EU, so only the member states. There is a usual impression that we are, leading the EU. We are leading the member states, or better to say, coordinating the member states. In the first presidency, we had the first half of the year. Now we have a second half. Second half means more work with the European Parliament, more negotiations on the legal dossiers with the European Parliament, so-called trilogues. Parliament, Council, Presidency, and European Council. European Commission. With the new European Parliament we have, which is far more diverse than it was the previous one, that's going to be a big challenge. So now we are, and plus, not to forget to mention, we are working in a trio, the same one we had in the first presidency. Mr. Ruppel will remember that the presidency, the trio, was a very good one, as it is now. So first is the Germany, then the Portugal, and Slovenia. So we are now working with the trio presidency on one side to agree who will do what during the presidency, especially on the foreign affairs, so that every presidency will not deal with every issue. And on the other side, we are preparing also logistics and the substance for our presidency. As concerns the substance, the government adopted the beginning of September the first draft of the Slovenian priorities for the 2021. The first draft, because we are now with the first draft, we are now waiting for the new commission to present their own priorities, and after that we will amend our priorities. That's on one side, and on the other, now the previous presidency will do some work on the so-called inherited agenda. So then we can clear some stuff that we planned, but it was already done before. On the substance, we have three baskets of priorities. The first one, as I see the most crucial one, is the sustainable development and everything what goes in. Mainly, we want to focus on the issues of circular economy, digitalization, artificial intelligence, social convergence as well. We want to combine all those with the reform of the European research area, to be more focused on the new challenges like climate transition and stuff like that. Then there are green technologies, creative industries, and for example, on the agriculture side, also sustainable food production plus more sustainable rural development, for example. The second box, the second basket, is a rule of law and the values. Here we see that the rule of law and the values are now becoming the constant in each and every presidency. We want to follow that in the future as well. Maybe also focus more on specifics. For example, better cooperation in criminal law, and on the one side, and on the other, I was mentioning before the IE, so in artificial intelligence, tackling the issue of ethical and regulatory aspects of the use of artificial intelligence. So stuff like this. It sounds very technical, but it's a challenge we have ahead. And the third box, the third package, is, we call it Save Europe as a good partner in neighborhood and at the global stage. It's quite a big package. It comprises of three sub themes. One is security, the issue of internal and external security. The second is to enhance the role of the EU at the global stage. And the third one is a more regional one. Every presidency usually have some regional issues. For example, Finland, the Arctic area. Germany will most sure will have the focus on China. Portugal on Africa. You can imagine Western Balkans. Which was also the priority in the first presidency. So these are three major packages, which were also already consulted within the parliament. I'm going back to the parliament on Friday. So this discussion here is before the debate in the European Committee in the National Parliament on this priorities. We will take their views and use them when we amend the new draft of the priorities. The last draft, or the real priorities, are going to happen most probably half a year before the presidency, and a lot of things will happen there by then. This is not to be long. But
sure. Thank you, Igor, for this. It's very interesting, forward-looking, specifying short-term challenges, short-term priorities, and of course, as we had other debates before, also the approach to the European Union, not just in theory but also in practice, has typically been event-driven. So it's and especially presidency, of course, will also react to something that will have happened then. And I'm mentioning that because now in 2019 we are in it seems it's a relatively stable environment. There are still some problems, at the fringes, as it were. But when the idea that Professor Jambrecht developed within his project on the Ljubljani initiative came across, that was probably already in 2014, 15, 16, then the European Union was really at a point of rupture. And it came as a surprise. It didn't come as something that was sort of widely expected. The economic crisis, as we know, was fully unexpected. The European Union wasn't prepared for it. We reacted with austerity and other ad hoc mechanisms. But the crisis that almost tore the European Union apart and really fueled populism was, of course, a crisis of migration. And that where it was clear that, in a way, the European Union can no longer protect its own borders and ensure within itself the area of freedom, security, and justice. Sort of we debated at this university that this, to a certain extent, resembled also something that was going on, that was happening to Yugoslavia at the time. And here I have Professor Jambrecht, who's someone who has seen it all, right? He saw, he was part of the country that was created after the Second World War, which was undemocratic and with its own legal regime, and it was then collapsed as it did. He was someone who was drafting a new constitution, trying to create a new state, and he still is a stakeholder in this country. And I'm wondering, Professor Jambek, when you are listening to these two first presentations today and observing the way the European Union has developed, especially after Brexit, because Brexit, to a certain extent, also it appeared something as, to a certain extent, might resemble something that Slovenians would have done to Yugoslavia at the time, right? Escaping the union that has become simply, I wouldn't say too oppressive, but maybe not welcoming enough. And I wonder, Professor Jambek, when you're looking at observing this situation, what is a broader conclusion that can be drawn out of this? Is there, I hope there is, a future for the European Union? And if there is it a constitutional one? And what kind of constitution should this strange animal, the European Union, have?
Well, Professor, I will try to put my answer to your question, very general, very abstract one, in simple terms. And that would be, what are prospects and what kind of reality stands behind an idea of a new constitution for the European Union? It's utopian. It's maybe completely unrealistic. And we have drafted a new constitutional process for the European Union in the year 14, 15, 16, together with my friend Dimitri Rupel, yourself, Professor Petric, our president Pahor, based upon a very simple experience of constitutional writers' attempt in 1988. In the midst of the totalitarian regime, there was a group of writers and poets and philosophers and a couple of lawyers who drafted a new constitution for the Slovenian state, which there was no Slovenian state. It was Yugoslavia and it was a totalitarian regime. And then we simply translated the European Convention of Human Rights with some Bavarian and German elements of constitutional knowledge, and made a short, simple text which acquired the name of the title of Writer's Constitution, and we thought we put it into the ladder for future generations of our friends and Slovenian people. And it so happened that in November next year, 89, the Berlin Wall fall, the democratic process across Eastern and Central European countries began, and the Writer's Constitution, actually with the minor changes, became the present-day valid Slovenian constitution. So there is an element of surprise in constitutional writing. And this element we followed in the year 14, 15, 16. We drafted a constitution for the European Union, knowing that it may be a completely unrealistic academic attempt, which will never happen, or it may be around the corner to happen. Now, to put it in a simpler terms, is there a chance in Western Europe, organized along the lines of European Union, are there any issues and problems which request a constitutional drafting? I think there are a number of issues which are not solvable along the present constitutional texts of the European Union, and which need some kind of constitutional drafting, not maybe as encompassing as we have done it in 14 and 15 in the Ljubljana initiative, but maybe piecemeal. And it is maybe a task of academics to draft something in a more general terms, and then it's a matter of politicians to take piecemeal some elements out of such academic drafting to serve their needs. One of the ideas of the constitution, which has, I think, 189 clauses, paragraphs, is, and I've simplified very much, the firm, legally defined, regulated, and protected external borders of European Union. We started from the assumption that firm external, let us say, Schengen and Dublin borders of European Unions are the sole condition for the absence of internal borders between the member states of European Union. So the inner area of freedom is secured by the outer external borders of the Union themselves. The more academic freedom, the more economic exchange of services and goods without borders within European Union is only possible if you have European Union firmly protected from the outside major actors on the world scene. So that was one thing. The other is, the other idea was that the European Union, Brussels bureaucracy should be put on a firmer level of democratic legitimacy and absolved of its unnecessary bureaucratic influences and motives and ambitions to regulate all kinds of issues that do not conform to a liberal state. So we didn't think explicitly of United States constitutional drafters, fathers of the United States, but somehow we approach their wisdom of having a state which is firm in dealing with the outside powers and very liberal and free from the inside. I would guess that maybe the British experience is similar, but it happened in another way than in the United States. So the whole text was misunderstood by one of the very serious analysts of the text, Dr. Lee Rotherham from Britain, from United Kingdom, who was very critical of our text, very thorough, very pedantic. But from a Brexit point of view, he disagreed with the idea of the European Union Constitution as we drafted, while he misunderstood the main concerns of the Constitution. If he would not be, as he was, concerned about the alienation or secession of United Kingdom from European Union, he might be closer to our concerns about European Union. So I would, to conclude the initial information about the Ljubljana initiative, is that at least an exclusive competence, a new exclusive competence on the constitutional level of the European Union of the secure and regulated external borders is needed. Without without this kind of transfer of powers from the nation state, we cannot really solve the problem of regulating in a humanitarian way the immigration, the asylum state policies, and also the idea and ambition of the European Union to become a major power in world politics. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Janbrek. I think you've squared really well the debates and the problems that have been raised before with this idea of sort of a double-headed constitution. A constitution which is rigid and robust externally, but which is very flexible and liberal inside, within its own constitutional framework. And this is also something that, if the European Union had been governed in that way, that might have given more room, more flexibility, or even more room and more flexibility to the United Kingdom, and which might have then turned the referendum result differently, and we would have seen the developments differently as well. I will not abuse the position of the chair. There's a really a great audience here in front of us. We still have at least 30 minutes for a debate, and I just invite questions, comments to our presenters. If it is a comment, I'd invite it to be short. If it's a question, it can be a longer one. Please, who would like to go first? Yeah, Neil.
Yeah, so I would like to...
If you can stand up so we can hear you better. Thanks.
I would like to have a question from the lady. And I want to know, how do you see the future of the European Union from the British perspective? Thank you.
We collect maybe two more, and then anyone else? So it's a very easy question, Sophie. So,
Well, I would say we see the future of the European Union as a really, really close partner. Whether that's in terms of trade, security, education, whatever dimension you choose to look at, the European Union is a crucial partner for us. So we want a strong partnership, one of friendship, one of trust, one where we support each other. I mean, I know that might seem sort of difficult to understand, because people in this room might think, well, why on earth are you guys going then, right? And for as long as I can remember growing up, there's been a bit of debate in British society about the right nature of relationship with the EU. So we last had a referendum in 1975. So I was about 3 at the time. I don't remember it very well. But the results were quite different. So at that stage, it was 66%. It wasn't to enter, it was confirming our prior decision on entry. So 66% thought that the community at the time was the right place for the UK, and I think it was about 33% against. Then in 2016, it was very close, 48-52. But attitudes had changed over that time for a number of reasons, and it's quite hard to pin down why that was. But what's clear is that people want to have a very close relationship, and that would be a majority view. There's, an infinitesimal minority who would not agree with that. But I think the balance of view changed on what was the right sort of relationship. And I think my best explanation of that is that as things changed and the European Union covered greater scope, in the UK, the government lost some public consent for our membership of the EU, and therefore wanted to negotiate, to try and find a different type of relationship. But in terms of the future, it's crucial for the UK that such a close partner as the EU flourishes. So that's the future that we see. We definitely see there are all sorts of challenges for our continent that we need to confront together, whether those are security challenges, whether it's dealing with the question of migration, whether it's about how we ensure our economies grow. Those are all challenges that we want to tackle together, but from the basis of a different type of relationship. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's the best sort of explanation I can give.
We have 2 more questions, at least from the audience. Mr. Pleskovic.
Yeah, I would like to know what was the role of misinformation, the people who will lose the most, the jobs in car industry, in other industries. They voted for Brexit, and your London city, the financial hub of Europe, is now already moving to Paris and Frankfurt. At some point, your financial London city was 30% of GDP of England. So, what was the role? If people were properly informed, probably they wouldn't vote to get out. And why was so easy for Norway or Switzerland to have a deal with European Union? And in Switzerland, I can go with my ID over the border. There is no lines of trucks and so on. Norway has a similar agreement, but you, for 3 years, you can't get out of this. Thank you.
There's quite a lot of points in there. So shall I try and cover those? I mean, the point about misinformation is really interesting, and it's, I think, a really common concern that people raise about the referendum. And 3 years on, there has been so much discussion, and I think if you're looking for positives, one positive in the UK is that people are more politically attuned. There is greater understanding about our EU membership, and the referendum had one of the highest turnouts that we've had in either a referendum or national elections, and I think we've seen that since, in that it's sort of made people realise that expressing their political voice is really, really important. But having said all that, I think it's quite interesting, and you might say quite surprising, that the polling hasn't really changed. I mean, obviously it fluctuates a little bit, but I was looking today at there's a sort of poll of polls which looks at the average of the last 6 months, and it's actually pretty similar to just before we had the referendum. So it shows a slight lead for Remain over Leave, when the question is how would you vote if there was another referendum? But it's no significant difference, and obviously the polling there turned out to be wrong. So I guess my conclusion from that on the question of misinformation is that whilst there is, I would say, a better understanding of the importance of our membership, the reasons that caused people to vote for a different type of relationship haven't necessarily changed. So, the country is still quite split on it, but as I said at the beginning, the polling, and polls aren't perfect, but it's a blunt tool, shows that a majority of people think that it is better to deliver on the referendum and respect the referendum. If you ask, do you think there should be another referendum? It's a minority, it's a significant minority. I think it's around 30%, and it's a similar proportion of people who think it's a good idea to have a no-deal exit. So sort of what you were saying about misinformation. On the city, it's another really, really important point. We had in Ljubljana a few weeks ago, actually, an event on fintech, which is an area where there's a lot of development in the UK, and Slovene banks are also interested. So it's all about how technology can make access to financial services easier for people like me who are really rubbish at going to the bank and want to be able to do everything here. I was talking to quite a few of the bankers who'd come out, and there were also people from Lloyd's, the big insurance broker, about the adjustments for Brexit. And most of them were saying, look, we just want certainty, because actually they have changed their business model quite a lot in anticipation of Brexit. And they have generally opened an HQ, often in Frankfurt. But what they said to me is that the preconception that would involve moving very large numbers of staff, sort of sapping that out of the city into Frankfurt, has proved to be untrue. They have generally opened an operation so that they have a representation within the EU, but with a relatively small number of staff. So it has involved a shift, but not the sort of definitely not the sort of shift which is going to lead to an end of the city's status as a leading financial centre, which is another reason why it's important for us to work together, because the debate about where the next, the big financial centre is it London or is it Singapore or is it New York? And London is in Europe and so connected with the EU. Now I wrote down one more thing that you asked. Lines, queues, travel. I mean, there are quite a lot of things which are unclear at the moment, as Igor alluded to. Luckily, there are some which are clear, and that's that whatever happens in the next few weeks, whether we are able to leave as we want with a deal and start negotiating the future relationship, or if it were to be a no-deal exit, it's agreed between the UK and the EU that for short visits, so of up to 3 months, whether that's for holiday or business, the same arrangements would apply. So people wouldn't need visas, and that should be fairly straightforward. So
we have a question from Marko Volch.
The question is addressed to the four of you, so that you don't feel like you're in the firing line alone as an ambassador. If you look at the past 15 years, ever since the Big Bang, when 10 countries, including this country of ours, joined, we've been on a roller coaster, emotionally, politically, even in terms of identity and so on. There was a lot of optimism of new Europe. Then, not that long afterwards, we had the Greek crisis and the very essence of, is European Union still a viable project, although it was the most successful social project in mankind's history, to be followed by Brexit, which is still an ongoing saga. So it's been a roller coaster, and it's very difficult to extrapolate what the future will bring. But nevertheless, not having a crystal ball, what would you say is after the Brexit situation is done, and presumably what we heard is a matter of weeks, and of course there will be some hiccups and we have to get used to the new geography. Is Europe going to be a more homogeneous European Union, or are we likely to see other exits?
Thank you. Who would like to respond to that? Who would like to go first?
May I just make a comment, which is a nasty one, and I apologize for that. But our friend Badinter, when he was in Ljubljana attending our conference on Ljubljana Initiative and the drafting, he somehow predicted the Brexit future history as something that would end up by Scotland joining European Union.
Igor.
Also a nasty comment. If I may to make the audience more liable, I would say that regarding the political uncertainty, I wouldn't say a mess, but political uncertainty there is in London, I believe that the ambassador is doing a great job with the answers on your tough questions. But on the question on whether there is going to be another exit or not, well, who knows? But the exercise of the Brexit has shown that the EU27 became even more united and stronger because of all the difficulties with the Brexit. The other question is, are we going to become stronger and more coherent and in the near future? I don't know, but it is high time to get the answer to this question in the, I would say, the period of the next European Commission, so the next 5 years. Because if we don't deliver, then the populism will rise even more than it has in the previous years. So now we have a it's high time to move on with the EU project, and to reform whatever result will be. We have on one side huge challenges, and on the other, we have to decide how to reach better efficiency regarding the decision making, regarding the as a system, QMV and questions like that, and how to come to a point that there will be more trust between member states in the EU, and as it was when we entered 2004, so that leaders or ministers or at whatever level would have more energy for compromises. So now it's the time to come to a point where we want to go, how, and the questions like that.
You cannot say anything nasty. That's quite clear, and I'm sure you won't say anything nasty. But how would you respond to what you've been addressed to?
Well, in terms of your question about what the future holds, then yeah, I don't have a crystal ball either. And the future direction for the European Union will obviously be for the members to determine and shape. And I think there have been things that have been difficult over these past 3 years. But one thing that the UK has worked very hard to do has been to follow the principle of sincere cooperation, so to take part and participate and meet our responsibilities as a member, but also step back in the right way from decisions about the future that should primarily be for members of the future to make. And I don't know if you think, Igor, but I think we hope in London that we have done that well. We've really tried to do that well and properly. But in terms of, I'll maybe say a word about the future in terms of UK EU links, because I think there is a choice there. There is a very simple way of looking at it is a sort of bifurcation in terms of whether we decide together to build a different relationship, but a very strong and positive relationship, or whether it doesn't go in that direction. And the UK definitely wants the first, and I think I would agree with what Igor said about the trend that there has been for the 27 to work very closely, and I think that's really positive. And people often think that's a negative from the UK's perspective, but it's a positive because it makes it easier to work together. And when you have that sort of internal strength and cohesion, you can decide either to be sort of closed then in how you cooperate beyond that union, or you can decide to be open. And I would say that there is a choice for the EU there, and I hope that we'll see the openness and building that future link. And I think that is absolutely the aspiration as set out in the political declaration, but we need to get through this current period and finish off the issues to do with exit so that we can move on to that. Other exits, I don't, Igor would know better, but I don't hear other member states talking about that or considering that. I think you're right that people have also seen that it's not easy. It's quite difficult to unravel 40 years of such close working and find the way forward. So I personally don't see that. In terms of political uncertainty, then it is quite a crunch period at the moment, seeing what happens over the next few weeks. But I think at the same time, some things are quite clear in terms of the government's position. Within our parliament, there has been huge debate, but some things are also quite clear in that there is still a majority who would like to see exit and think that it's important to deliver on the referendum, but want to do that without the backstop. And that's also the case if you look at the political platforms of the main parties, the main opposition. So the Labour Party, also their position is that it's important to deliver on the referendum and negotiate a deal, but their position is then to put that to a referendum.
If I may,
yeah, sure.
2 sentences. First, you now I lost it. Okay, the second, when asking about the future of Europe, what is in the stars, what will happen, I always ask myself, for the countries like Slovenia or I don't know, Luxembourg or Finland, what is the alternative? Is there any better alternative than the EU in the world we are live in? And I will do a full stop. On the exits, now I remembered, on the future exit, there is a funny thing. The usual suspects for the next exit usually have the highest share of those who are very much pro-European. That's the countries you would think would be next have one of the highest pro-European polls.
So their opinion is just sort of more polarized.
No, it's not polarized. But if you would imagine or think which member state would be the next to exit, and if you see what are the polls for between pro-Europeans and contra, and those member states, the pro-Europeans are at the level of 70-80%. So it's interesting.
So if I may, sort of to put this into a broader perspective and reflecting about the future and thinking actually about why the present situation seems to be so unsettling. And I think it is so unsettling because of the lack of certainty, and the lack of certainty goes against the grain of the Western civilization, which has been from the time immemorial about the order. And especially in Europe since the end of since the Peace of Westphalia, since the end of the 30-year war, Europe has been about structuring order in these interstatal relationships. And this order could have been, and it has been, achieved in many ways. And it can be, as somebody famously put it, during the Cold War scenario, there was order in the world. It was called MAD, mutual assured destruction. Because there was a mutually assured destruction, there was the world was much more certain, much more predictable. When that collapsed, that certainty was lost, and within the context of the European Union, something else was necessary. And out of the atrocities of the Second World War, what was born was this idea of sincere cooperation, as you put it, the idea of solidarity, something which was imbued with certain kind of ethics, which of course disappears once you forget about the bad times that this ethical feeling has been spurred by. So what was providing for the fuel of the ordered European Union was of course the output legitimacy. And you keep referring to that. The European Union needs to deliver, it needs to deliver. It's like a cyclist that has to pedal. When he stops pedaling, or when she stops pedaling, it falls off the bike. And I think 15 years ago, European Union fell off the bike. And we are still looking for the means of delivering. However, the problem is, in my eyes, if we want to deliver that which is really necessary, and we all essentially know what's necessary. And what's necessary is, in economic terms, to ensure a robust monetary union that will be sort of supported by a robust fiscal union. And through that, of course, you would also need a robust security forces and external protection of our external borders. But to have all of that, what you need is a democratic political support. You cannot have a European military. You cannot have a European taxes. There's no taxation without representation, as this country knows really well. So you cannot have all of that without the European political union.
But we do not have a European political union because the member states act as if they are still self-sufficient and independent, sovereign and autonomous and blah, blah, blah. So the thing is that there's a problem. The problem is how to get from something that we objectively need in terms of institutions, structured policies, and what we simultaneously have in political and de facto democratic terms. And I think one part and parcel of the idea of the Ljubljana initiative was also to provoke with this constitution, to provoke with this idea, to trigger this kind of reflection that there's something beyond a nation state which can ensure a viable polity without exhausting the member states as they are. But as long as we do not make this move, we'll be catching up. And we'll be catching up with the need to deliver. And this has been a history from the enlargement. You will still remember we have had a stampedo of treaty changes. And each treaty change dealt with the leftovers of the previous treaty change, something that couldn't be achieved. And this worked well when times were good, when the economy delivered, etc., etc. So the real challenge for the future, and that future is imbued with the need of certainty and order. That's, as I said, it's part and parcel of the Western civilization. The way we've been constructed is how to deliver this order by sort of not pulling the state apart, but sort of extending the state beyond itself. It's a theoretical challenge, but I think it's also a practical institutional challenge. And I lay my hopes in this convention or conference on the future of Europe. Any other question? Please, gentlemen.
I have a question from the gentleman on the left regarding the new European Constitution.
As Professor Jambrecht.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I lost his name because I came late. So, do you think a new European Constitution would actually create a new state, might called a European Federation? And do you think the majority of Europeans would agree to that? And also, you said that for external borders to be secured, there has to be a new European Constitution. But as we can see, Hungary is doing their job quite well. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think it gets down to the essence of our thinking. I would consider the European or Eastern European nationalisms or so-called populisms as easily interpreted as pro-European tendencies. They only have to be respected as democratic states which have their own sovereign rights within European Union as a state. European Union as a state. I would avoid the term federation or confederation. I would stick to the doctrine of Professor Albert. It's a union, a novel, sui generis phenomenon designed on American experience of a firm state with very few competencies in distributing welfare among its member states. So to avoid the problem of jealousies among more or less productive regions of a state, European Union, it would be desirable to reduce the competencies in terms of welfare and social distribution and rely upon competencies of a state firm as an actor on world politics only. So I don't see any problems in terms of major economic and social differences between Sicily and Poland, between Westphalia and Catalonia, United States can handle this kind of differences by simply avoiding distributing wealth from the center to the periphery and from periphery to the center. And they are successful in that. So, well, American president in his United Nations address, I think he touched upon this kind of issues. Please do read and see the video which is distributed.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Can I maybe
Sure, please.
add a couple of thoughts on this question of order? Matej, you were talking about the sort of aspiration of political union, and as you were talking about that, I was sort of reflecting on the shift we've had in the UK from 66% of people supporting our membership in 1975, changing to 48% in 2016. And I think part of the reason for that trend is that some of the discussions around sort of ever closer union and those concepts which resonate and work for many member states haven't in the UK. And I think it was because of that some of those people who would have voted previously in favour of our membership changed their view. And I guess my sense is that it's inevitable within a European Union of 27 or 20 member states that there will be different takes on that question. There will be some member states for whom that gels. Indeed, there'll be some parties within those member states for whom it gels and others for whom it doesn't. So I think that the notion of flexibility and variable geometry is really, really important for those sorts of aspirations. And then perhaps just an observation on order, which maybe applies particularly to the way I see things in the UK. But I actually see, things are quite unpredictable, to be sure, but I actually feel that there is order because the key principles are holding. We are a parliamentary democracy, and what do you see? You see Parliament holding government to account. We see very strongly independence of the courts and respect for the rule of law. And what you see is a very, very important debate on something which is so crucial to our national interest. And look at the negotiations on Brexit. It affects pretty much so many aspects of life. You see that debate, and it was close in 2016. You see that debate playing out within an ordered framework where those principles hold. And I think actually it's a good thing that you have those debates. I would be worried if those principles weren't holding. For me, it would then be disorder. But if those principles hold, then that's a good thing. And I think the same applies to the discussions and the negotiations between the UK and the EU on Brexit. They're not always easy, but we discuss these things. We try and find compromise. We try and find a way forward, and we do that within the principle of sincere cooperation. So although it might feel quite sort of messy and chaotic, I would argue that in some sense, in a really big picture, the order is holding. And if you're optimistic about that, and there is goodwill on all sides, then it might take you longer than you thought, but you will eventually get together to the right prognosis for the relationship between our countries and our continent going forward. And then finally, maybe Igor, just picking up something you were saying about I think you were saying that in a sense Slovenia doesn't have a choice in terms of the EU. I think was that.
What's the alternative?
Yeah, but in a sense, I think sometimes people see what's happening in the UK and think, so is the UK flipping to America and giving up on the EU? And I really don't think that is the way it is. I mean, from a trade perspective, 53% of our trade is with the continent of Europe. So it wouldn't make sense at all. It would be completely against our national interests to do that. Yes, we have a very long-standing special relationship with the US, but it's not at all a choice that we are flipping like that. We want to continue working very, very closely with our European partners, but our people in a referendum have voted for a different type of relationship. So at the moment we're trying to figure out together how to deliver on that. But I would argue within an ordered framework.
Mr. Pliskich wanted to get back briefly, and then we will sort of wrap it up.
I would just like to say that Europe should be aware of the power of big numbers. A friend of mine was just writing an article and was comparing the US GDP with China, and if you take purchasing power parity index, is China has even bigger GDP than US. US has 330 million people, Europe has 500. So I asked him when he was making this comparison to add up total GDP of US and Europe, and it's very close, 20 trillion or 18 trillion. That's why Trump is quite happy to try to support Brexit, to break up Europe, because Europe is very competitive. When I worked in US, very intelligent economists say, but there was a bunch of bureaucrats who put this market of 500 million together. When Euro came out, Robert Mondale is a father of Europe, and he got the Nobel Prize for it. Americans, intelligent economists from the Federal Reserve said, this is going to be like Nigeria. We'll have 2,000% inflation, or Bolivia. It's never going to work. 1 to $2, it's not going to work. About Brexit, if you go out without agreement, you're going to pay huge price. Financial city, car industry, everything. And Scotland may just get a referendum to get out of the United Kingdom. So if you get a deal like Switzerland or Norway, you'll be okay. But if you don't get a deal, you have 30% trade with US, more than 50% with Europe. If you cannot trust Trump and US, they'll give you such conditions that you will not believe. So you better make a deal.
We had a deal at the beginning that we'll finish at 7:30. I'm always bad with keeping the time. Igor, did you want to say something else? Had an impression? And
two reflections. One is you said it 15 or something years ago.
15 years, yeah.
EU fell off the bike.
Yeah.
My take is it didn't.
Uh-huh.
It's just the case that the slope got higher,
Okay.
Steeper. Professor Dr. Jandrek said, watch the speech of President Trump in UN. My response, please, at the same time, see the other Donald's speech. This is the Donald Tusk speech, which is a sort of a response to the Trump speech. It's gonna be funny. I can tell you, it's quite telling. And the last word on there was the debate on political union. Political union was always the final goal, but we came to the economic union, and then we are at the moment stuck here. And now there is a debate even going on whether to renationalize some policies from certain member states. So here we have to decide what I was talking about before, whether to go into a deeper union, and that means more power to Brussels. And please, in my view, this is positive. It doesn't mean that in Brussels there are also our people, not just few very much renowned ones who are living. Or on the other side, less power to institutions, and then we have less powerful union. So this is the question we have to tackle as well in the future.
Yes.
And there are some thoughts from certain member states whether let's gather those who want more integration in one circle, and have the others still in the EU in the other circle. Yeah? And just a short note on the UK. UK was never in the inner circle of the EU. Always had some how is it called? Lots of opt-outs. More interested in internal market than the political union. Yeah? And at the end of the days, when the mathematics came to an end that UK will, because of the enlargement of the Eurozone, will lose its vote or will be outvoted, then UK started to rethink their strategy and started to discuss whether, okay, maybe we should go out. Sorry to be so bold, but this is my take on the events in the last, I don't know, 15 years.
We will need to continue this discussion over a drink. There will be a reception immediately following this academic forum on the first floor. Very importantly, Igor also assigned you with a homework, that is to watch 2 videos. Actually, one was assigned by Professor Jamlek and the other by Igor. And this reminded me that something that I've forgotten to mention, that the academic forum is also an elective course here at the new university. So those students who have taken this academic forum as an elective course, you're anyhow assigned or required to produce a written response to what you heard today, or at the end of the semester there is a larger seminary work to be produced. We started this debate and by no means it has been exhausted. It also wasn't our purpose to be exhaustive. What was our purpose was to think, to grapple, to reflect about the future. And as I said, the need for that came from the at least of the perception of the weakness of the European Union. However, at the same time, those people who think about the future, there is something optimistic about them. And there's a word that you really mentioned, it's optimism. It also goes into the grain of the Western civilization and the political idea of modernity, which has always been about progress and trying to create the world to suit human beings and to live in a kind of order. What I want to say is that these debates will be continued. The academic forum will take place every month, not necessarily here in Ljubljana, maybe also at other venues, because, and not just for the sake of this project that we are conducting, but because we would really like to have here at the new university in the heart of the Ljubljana, as some would say the most beautiful city in the world, we would like to create an intellectual hub where the most important social issues would be debated, contested, and thought about. This was just the beginning. I really thank my speakers, my guests to be with us, and of course the audience, all distinguished guests, excellencies. Thank you very much for coming, and I hope to see you soon.